on the next panel discussion. Renaissance of the industry, or industrial renaissance. All of the talking with our speakers shows that whether we have renaissance or we're only planning it. Then, so now we will invite the speakers, Dmytro Kislovsky, an MP, head of the Committee on Economic Development, or deputy. So, C, Inga Andreeva, the General Director, CEO of MasterCard Ukraine Moldova, Marcin Walski, Vice Prime Minister Polish Union of Employers, Alexander Bilecki, CEO of Shared Company that produces amphibious vehicles. So, Alexander Mishov, General Director of Employers Association, and Sergei Chernkov, the head of the PUMB Bank Management. Thank you, colleagues. So, this is a difficult panel discussion because the speakers here are not only present from companies that are producing stuff. They're different businesses, but they're all united together by one thing. Why I'm confident? Because when we talked, I realized for myself that when we talk about renaissance in industry, we are not only talking about building it or people who work in there, but in the end, like downstream, where things are being bought and how to pay for these things. And that's why we have such an interesting and varied speaker set. So let's start from Inga. So in the spring this year, my company did a survey. What is the attitude to entrepreneurs and what kind of problems they see in the state that stand in the way? Everything that they said about the second part, both entrepreneurs and society, well, the pressure, law enforcement, taxes, and all of that is known. I'm not touching these issues at this panel discussion, but I want to focus on things that we as entrepreneurs can resolve. I know that you've just completed a study, a survey, where you asked entrepreneurs about their problems. So have anything changed? What are the problems that they talk about? What is missing? So through the prism of producers, because entrepreneurs is a wide scope, but let's look at a real sector of economy. I'll start from positive things. So the small and medium businesses, if we measure by the number of entrepreneurs, is 99% of Ukrainian economy. It's the foundation of economy and the capacity for restoration of economy. For many years, we concentrated on supporting small and medium businesses. Why? Because we see direct connection or cyclical dependence. As soon as we see money on electronic accounts, as soon as it's visible for economy, the cycle speeds up. Official salaries are paid, new jobs are created, so the cycle becomes quicker and quicker, and it is visible for the economy. That's why we are for cashless. For now, we provide many technologies, and we understand that cashless transactions is not just competitive edge. It's not an option. It's a must. It's what the businesses have to have in order to continue growing, scaling up. If we want to be present online as a business, if we want to be present on marketplaces, if we want to reach other markets, if we want to pursue exports in cashless accounts, we can't do it without cashless. So it's a must-have technology. Our survey has shown that 80% of respondents told us that at the moment they already get more than 50% through cashless transactions. And it's great. We are moving towards cashless economy. And of course, the study shows the problems. That's what Olena has asked. What do we see this year? We have only completed, it's a fresh information. We have just completed our survey, and I would specify four things. First, 41% says that they need additional funding. I think we will be talking about it as well. But there's not enough funding. Just a similar percentage, 41%, says that they can feel the lack of orders and customers, and that they need to go to the markets. It's going back to exports, because cashless transactions, all technologies should be there. Without it, you won't be able to scale up. Whereas each fifth talk about the lack of staff, of people. We know the reasons. Another important and interesting fact that we've noticed this year: every fourth entrepreneur talks about energy. Where do they get the energy? Electricity, and their own physical and mental health. So they're exhausted. They're overstressed. That's another problem. So as a MasterCard, in terms of cashless transactions, we support them, but we also want to support small and medium enterprises through different helping hand. We do grant programs, we do training. All of that is about social responsibility. It's about support for entrepreneurs. So, let's take other programs. We are, for many years, have been partners for Ministry of Digital Transformation. We launched Dia Business, so as a web portal. We are also partner of offline consulting centers. You know that we have them both in Ukraine, and 2 years ago we had the first international center in Warsaw. And a great interesting statistic that in 2 years there were more than 10,000 consultancies provided. That means that the entrepreneurs need scaling up, and they're going to other markets. Plus, I absolutely need to talk about cashback problem. We are the technological partner, and millions of new consumers, more than 300,000 producers that are also registered in this program. So these are also very significant numbers. And just recently, I saw some statistical data shared by Ministry of Digital Transformation. Over October, 125 million of national cashback. That's also about supporting entrepreneurs. All right, so made in Ukraine. We won't be talking about the made in Ukraine in terms of national cashback, so that we don't, provoke too many discussions. But Metro, we won't be talking about it because this is a small percentage. And if we talk about national cashback and another part of it made in Ukraine, another part of it made in Ukraine is about, it looks a bit different. So I want to talk about this, that the larger masses don't know. You've done a lot in this program, and this program aims to develop entrepreneurs. What has been planned, what's also done, and what companies already used what you've done? Thank you for the question and for opportunity to share. I'm Dmytro Kiselevsky. I'm the Deputy Head of Economic Committee of the Parliament. I did present you already, just in case. So, and I'm responsible for the Made in Ukraine policy. Of course, the national cashback is only one small component of this policy, and it's not primary in terms of topics for this panel discussion, because it's about industrial renaissance, it's about industry. So we're going to talk about things less known, but no less important. So I would start with the question to the audience: who of you heard about industrial parks? You all heard about them. Great. Have you ever visited industrial park? Okay, part of you have. It's a very important sign, because industrial parks all over the world are an important part of economic development and engaging investments in the real sector. And in Ukraine, this tool has started working, finally. And now we have 25 factories already built or are being built in industrial parks. While we sit here and talk, we have about 100,000 square meters of industrial real estate that is awaiting relocated companies or new companies, almost 200 megawatts of capacity to join, so that the company can start working quickly. And this is all the result of state policy to develop industrial parks, and it starts to take off in Ukraine. We designed this little magazine. You could read some of it so that you understand what are industrial parks in Ukraine now. There's a stand out there, and you can see it. On the cover, it's not a picture from the internet. That's a factory in Rivne, who invested 200 million euros in the new production line. Now, what do we see at the moment? Because of the situation of war, we see the change in priorities of state policy. Finally, those who produce become important for the country. Because if you don't produce missiles, you don't have missiles. Nobody will give. So transformers, drones, missiles, if we produce them, we have them. If we don't, we don't. Because otherwise it's waiting for some help abroad which doesn't come. So finally, our policy changes from ideology, like the ideology or protectionism, like this is what we do. No, finally, in state policy, we have pragmatic approach. We're doing something that is needed, so that things are being produced. If you need barriers, then it's barriers. If you need grants, we provide grants. So it's all for the goal. And now the ideas that I'm talking about are united by Made in Ukraine. It's the policy of developing Ukrainian producers to create conditions so that Ukraine produces the stuff that is necessary, that it needs to invest in production and export goods with high value added. That's what the policy Made in Ukraine is about. So there are many tools, those that provide the biggest opportunity, of course. So the first is about localization policy. Public procurement. It gives us the opportunity to compete in public procurement with others. So basically, we don't allow into some segments public procurement the goods from non-friendly countries like China. Localization protects from Chinese goods because China supports Russia. The Europeans remain, and there's competition between Ukrainian and European producers. Grants for production of processing. Thousands of Ukrainian business people have updated their park. It's an investment program up to 8 million hryvnia. The state gives grants to buy new production lines. If you haven't done this yet, if you are a producer, if you are part of the processing from microchips to flour, you take these grants and you can buy a new equipment. Credit line 579. I don't think I have to advertise it, but last year, almost 90% of all the loans issued in Ukraine were issued because the state launched this program. If there wasn't 579, there wouldn't be any loans. So now we are changing this program. We are reorienting it for investments. 16% you can take it now, but a limited resource that the state has, we want to use effectively. If you invest, you get cheaper money. Investment nurses or investment assistants. We were laughing at this joke, like prosecutors, law enforcement. But then two first companies signed investment agreements with government to support invested projects. So 30% of CAPEX can be compensated through different state forms of state support. A startup was number one, soybean processing, and so $60 million, 30% to compensate. Well, it's significant money, and it's about investing now. And then industrial park, I was already said it. An important thing here is 1 hryvnia of state investment in infrastructure of industrial park this year. For the first time, we implemented this program. It attracts 5 to 7 hryvnias of private investments. This is how it works. The state provides co-funding for infrastructure like electric substations, 115 million hryvnias, 115 million invested by private investors. It's 1-to-1 hryvnia. Then they take a commitment to have no less than 5,000 square meters of industrial real estate. So now there's 2 hryvnia or 3 hryvnia. And then this industrial real estate has to be engaged with 2 market players, producers, and they will invest money in placing their production there. Here's another 2 or 3 hryvnias. So the state having spent, or having to spend, deciding on spending 1 billion hryvnias, is expecting 5 hryvnias per each hryvnia of private investments to be generated. And we see that these people are ready to have this. So, and that's the ideas that we have in this policy made in Ukraine. It's very important so that we change governments or budgetary years. So these ideas have to be more sustainable and long lasting, because investments in so in the new government, if it ever happens, they need to change their ideology a little. All right, now Sergey, I talked with Metro. Can we say that we are now in the boom of industrial development? Of course not, but there is a growth in Miltech. They generate more taxes. But as for the civilian, no, it's not, not yet. So the Metro said so that in order for expedite this, we need long, cheap money. Where do we get cheap, long money? Greetings. It's a great question. I can tell you that right now in the banking system, there's a huge amount of money available. If you look at the deposit certificates, almost 400 billion hryvnias, free temporary money that it's hard to invest somewhere. But if you look at the dynamic of loan portfolio of banking system over this year, it's grown by 60 billion in 9 months. So it's 20% growth. Why it happened like that? Because the system, I would say, is in equilibrium. We have the level of inflation, 10%, devaluation, interest rate 13. So that added the planning horizon. So now we can work, and it's commercially attractive. So 60 billion growth, as you could hear. There are another 400 billion. So there is a market for lengthy investments. And you see the bonds also go longer. So these are the signs of normalization. Whether there's money in the system, no, in this case, you're talking about Ukrainian money. Yeah, I'm talking about Ukrainian money. So basically, I could finalize at the positive note, where I would say there's low demand for money. Maybe the study shows that there are a lot of dissatisfied people, but there's no big growth in economy. So if you look at the growth that we see in credit portfolio and take it in 3 years of war, it's even lower than the inflation level over the same period. So this first thing. Secondly, we understand that Now it's exclusive situation, it's war, and it's still active, so planning horizon is difficult. But if you look at the future, we need money for recovery. The economy was damaged a lot. So we lost a lot of industrial capacity, human capacity. We will need to restore it. And we need more money than we have now free on accounts available. Of course, we understand the support of our Western partners, but the programs are already there. And I want to say thanks to the Ministry of Economy, because they've done a lot this year. A lot of programs were signed with international funds, and almost a billion hryvnia. But my prediction that the efficacy of this program will be quite low, because basically most of these programs, well, first of all, they work directly with these big funds, and these big funds are not aimed at making a massive business out of this. This is very bespoke goods. So there's a strange limitation that most of these programs are concentrated only in Western banks and in state banks, so international banks. And if you compare how effective Ukrainian banks with state banks, basically the quality of growth of portfolio, the number of loans, and even the percentage of credit portfolio of Ukrainian banks, it's much bigger. And this is where I think it's a challenge for the state. The state has an interesting platform. It's FRP Foundation, the Entrepreneurship Development Fund, through which 579 is working as a basic program of supporting economy, and it played an important role in 2022 and at the start of 2023, and it needs to evolve. But it also has benefits. It is a platform of distribution of loans. So, in order for us to be able to use the money that comes from Western partners to make it effective, so that we have big agreements, and the companies like Astarta, Nova Poshta, they can be eligible for those funds, but no small company, no medium companies cannot, because the quality of financial management, well, it's lower, of course, and the capacity of those funds through which you can get that money is also limited. We have experimented even. How do you apply? You go to the website, you apply, and you don't know what happens next. Will they contact you back? No. So what's the essence of this solution? To make these programs through the state, so that the state attracts this money and then scales it up through the FRP platform. We don't even need it in dollars or euro. For SMEs, it's going to be foreign exchange risk. And the state can be here as a swap partner. Get that money, convert it into hryvnia, get some preferential interest rates if it's about time for that, and to make that money really enter the system. Of course, the subsequent economy growth will depend on not availability of credit lines, but to what extent this money will reach the entrepreneurs, the businesses, so that they can use that money. And that's what I would like to put into that message. Right, thank you. We'll ask Dmitro to communicate that to Madam Sviridenko, Ministry of Economy. Because if you mentioned that, I think it's going to speed up the process. Yeah, I was listening quite attentively, but it's important that the person, if the state has a limited resource of cheap money, then to credit import of mobile phones or credit, no, we're talking about European money. So that's also limited. And if the state can select what they want to buy, they have to prioritize. They don't. European money comes for commitment, and Mitro says that you don't need to put that money on European accounts. Sure. Let me finalize what I said. No. Marcin, the question to you. You see, we start talking about money, and there's a conflict. It was pre-planned, so that nobody falls asleep. Marcin, the question to you. Where did Poland take money? What was the role of the state in recovering for industry and in growth? And what was the role of entrepreneurs and businesses? Why businesses wanted to develop industry in Poland?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here. So first of all, I would divide that different expectations by domestic companies and foreign companies in terms of mobilizing investments into a specific country. That was the case for Poland. It's going to be the same. It is the same for Ukraine. In Poland, the boost in terms of investments, direct investments, both from domestic players and international one, was in years after 2000, more or less, especially with the access to the EU. And then in terms of the access to capital for Polish companies, it was important to use the Polish Development Bank and development institutions. So I would look at that. I wouldn't say the state. The state is should take the responsibility. The state is kind of too abstract. So you need to have a specific institution that takes care of the cost of capital and access to finance. As it was said, there can be a great capitalization of banks, but the cost of the capital might be too high to compete internationally or domestically. And then also is a question, you can have attractive amount, I mean a large amount of money, attractive cost of capital, but then it's a question who gets the money. And it's always, honestly, working with banks. Banks always favor large businesses and large projects, because basically the whole amount of work they need to do and the rating is better to do it for a 1 billion project than for SMEs. And this is why the Polish Development Bank was important. I was the entrepreneur at that time in late 2000, and we used a lot of loans, not grants. I don't think grants is the way forward. It must be about loans. It must be about the responsibility of entrepreneurs to absorb loans and to pay it back. But we had so-called de minimis program that SMEs could get the loan with a guarantee, because the specifics about SMEs, medium-sized companies, small companies, is that we don't have assets. We don't have collateral to secure the loan. So that was the role of the EU indirect financing, because it was about virtual money, right? There's no cash flow happening, that they secured, they provide guarantees for SMEs. And for example, when I did my investment in Łódź many years ago in the medical business, we used a lot this kind of financing, both for the investment, partly for the investment, but also for cash flow. Because again, small, medium-sized companies are rather, the exposure is to cash flow rather than to net profit year to year. So we need to look at that. So that's one. Of course, foreign investors don't care about it. They come with money. They come with international money. It's not the issue. For them, it is critical to have a safe, secure, predictable legal environment. I used to work a lot with direct investments for a couple of years. I used to give permits to operate in special economic zone in Poland, and the thing was about credibility of the country, about the ownership. Somehow in Poland, the ownership of the ground, of the land, was and is important. So no long-term lease or 99 years of the lease. It didn't work. I mean, always American companies, international companies came and wanted to buy the land and have the secure, reliable setup of rules that the land is on them. Of course, before buying the land, we had to be ready with the infrastructure. And it's both for Polish or international companies, it was the same story. So I'm glad you are proceeding with industrial parks. This is the way forward. We did it a kind of easy way. So the investment plots were mostly arranged by communes, like gromadas, right, at the local level. And we as, I would say, investment consultants, advisors from the public side, from the public entity, we made sure that it is properly equipped with utilities, with roads, and that the land itself, that the property has no legal issues. So every time there is a foreign investor coming, and I experienced that at least twice personally with companies here in Ukraine, that there was the issue with the legal status of the land. And this is, with if you want to acquire a company, this is a red light. You cannot do it. So it seems to be, ABC or really basic, but this is the point, to have a legal stability and predictability. And the third thing for domestic companies is what we experienced in 2004 is the access to markets. You can have the best, system here in Ukraine, lack of bureaucracy, easy permitting, which is also important, but I take that kind of for granted, that the permitting is transparent, more or less known. But if your companies, Ukrainian companies, don't have the access to markets, then it doesn't make sense. You still, are based here locally, and you cannot scale up your presence. And again, my message is also, I know we have the special time. You have a moderate access to the single market, but don't take it for granted. We need to work on it to continue having the access to the single market. Often I meet companies and they said, we are already part of the EU. Yes, but we need to jointly do our best to continue having that, because it's not said yet that it will continue. In our joint interest, I think, from the Polish perspective as well, is to continue having the access to markets.
Thank you very much, Marcin. Руслан, ви очолюєте спільноту велику.
I know, Ruslan, that you are in charge of a big number of employers, and on your accounts and pages, I can see a lot of trips, accounts together with Mr. Olena. You account for that. You go to different kinds of production manufacturers which are being launched and started and being built. From my perspective, you are a kind of a collector of all of the news and updates taking place in Ukraine. So what do you think from your perspective? What needs to be done so that we can look around and say that's definitely renaissance of our industry ensured? What needs to be done? Perhaps on behalf of the state, something that Metro has already spoken about, and what shouldn't be done? Because these will be unnecessary actions that will divert the proper attention. Thank you for your question. This is a very comprehensive system. When Alexander Sokolovsky gets questioned about these things, what need to be done, he will say, please don't touch. Well, I've told you, do not touch upon this issue. All right. Hands off some things. But in fact, everything that's being spoken about here today, it's critical, and every element that is being discussed nowadays is also very important. Because today, for example, you can resolve an issue of power outages with installing a generator. You can also put on reserve a great number of people. You make sure that you can produce 500 bottles an hour or a day. But once you go to the border with Poland, your truck will not be let across the border and you will lose all of your contracts. So you see, our situation is so out of the box, out of the ordinary. Therefore, I think that in the first place, we need to make sure that we don't lose some things. And secondly, we need to mention things that will enable our development. Concerning Renaissance, in fact, money is important. Regulatory environment does matter. However, if we take a look at the world surrounding us, everyone is fighting, everyone is at rivalry for investment, capital, production, etc. Therefore, getting back to what Metro has said, there's no other option for us but set up certain programs which are already operational, like localization. So what is it that we ought to do? We need to find growth points. The public order is a growth point. The defense industry is a growth point. Different opportunities and capacities in these sectors, they are working. For instance, cashback for agrarian producers is already working. It's very interesting to give illustrations because when you speak in general terms, it's never working. A couple of days ago, I was near Kief in one of the family Italian business company which works and produces everything that is to do with pneumatic tools and instruments. So how does this company operate in Ukraine? At first, they imported standard Kamotsi products to Ukraine and sold them to Ukrainians. Then in 2016, when they began to support agrarian machinery industry, they began to produce for some localization. That is to say, Ukrainians are supposed to put on these machinery items, something which is produced in Ukraine. And then Kamotsi realized that there were new customers, and they began to come up with some out-of-the-box solutions. And they came up with some out-of-the-box production of Kamotsi in Ukraine. Then they created an engineering design department. They came up with an IT department, and they got to such a point of production of these out-of-the-box things, unusual things for Kamotsi, that they say, you know, guys, now in Germany, pneumatic cylinders are necessary for German vehicles, and they say, yeah, we can do it. And now they have a third area of operations. They begin to design things in Ukraine and being manufactured in Ukraine and exported out of Ukraine. So this is how this program of agrarian machine building operates in Ukraine. So now we have set up a national exhibition center in Bologna in Italy, and I have been informed that there are 4 Italian companies which are ready to repeat the same experience, just because this program has already been launched into operation again. But if there is a risk that this program will be in suspension next year, what will we say to our Italian counterparts? So see, the same examples go for localization. 79 companies that produce end products, amongst them the Metro in 2021. There were 4,000 producers of component parts, 4,000. The multiplier is crazy, in fact. So this is how it's moving. So the world is utterly cruel. When you come to a factory, in February we went to Bota and we said, come and buy in Ukraine. And they started laughing. They say, we have manufacturing facilities in Latin America and Africa. We are not going to build it in Ukraine. We have 26 million worth of sales. So what can you contribute to that? This is half of the Ukrainian exports. When we say that our agri-production feeds the whole world, okay, this is a brave statement to make. But when we said about Boti, for example, we said, look, we have a localization. This is all clear, but become partners with us, sell to us 100 engines. Then we'll begin to install them in different kinds of tractors and loading equipment. Are you ready to do that? Yes. We are ready to do different kinds of equipment for excavators. Are you ready to comply with this? Yes, they say. So this is the fastest and most optimal way for us to cooperate with foreigners, for us to manufacture and attract investments to come. And that's something I believe in. Do I understand you correctly that you speak about cooperation between different businesses and you, in a way, are communicator between foreign and Ukrainian businesses. I think it's a fantastic initiative. Yes, nowadays we have a great number of such things, like the Danish company that makes minesweepers, and all the way to Japanese companies, Isuzu, for example, that have their manufacturing facilities in Cherkasy. Yeah, there are numerous, but these are just an illustration for you to see. Like you say, we have a program of agrarian machine engineering building, but people don't understand what this is. Maybe these people are not supposed to issue it with money, But foreigners immediately grasp these points. And we have scandals of the global level when Mazzotti, an Italian company, began to produce some sprays in Boguslav, which is 250,000 worth per one unit. 25% of that, for them it was a very good share, so they went for it. But John Deere decided against it, and they began to produce, and Boguslav began to procure these self-propelled sprayers. And now some countries in the world produce that, including Ukraine. And when John Deere bought Mazzotti in 2020, the first thing they did, they rescinded the agreement between Boguslav and Mazzotti, and they said, well, this company that was my rival back in the day is out of the market of Ukraine. But we as Ukrainians came up with our idea of how to make a similar product. So this is, once again, the governmental support doesn't mean money to nowhere. These are the results which I can cite hundreds and hundreds of. And this is very proper policy, which is really efficient and high performance. On the contrary, Oleg Bayarin, a friend of mine, invested 140 million euros, and he built a full-cycle automotive industry. And now for 15 years, this automotive industry facility isn't working, even prior to the war. And every single time we say, well, let's atomize this case. Why was it put to a stall on the cold rocks? Did it have investments? Yes. Were there any apartments? Yes, there were partners. Were there any qualified personnel? Yes, 2,000 employees. So why did not a single automotive company in the world not want to cooperate with him? It was a fascinating case. Did you look into that? Yes, we did look, but it's a long story to cut it short. But when the Employees Federation of Ukraine offered their own idea concerning how to raise taxes, there was one tax offered that there need to be also an additional tax offered when you buy a foreign car, and thus to incentivize buying Ukrainian-made products. And I began to look for some additional information in this regard, and I knew that I wanted to find out whether we had any manufacturing facilities of cars in Ukraine. Look, we have one huge factory for Hyundai made very recently. The owner is a financial industrial group, but the owners don't matter. Jobs and the capacity is what matters. And right now, unfortunately, it's not working. And another one in Ukraine. So in answer to your question, basically, I can tell you that every delegation from Volkswagen Group, beginning some 10, 15 years ago, they would say the same. When are you going to remove European cars out of Ukraine or Ukrainian roads, the ones that were purchased in Europe and brought here and not nationalized? So we did it. And now look, 5% increase of tax, of military tax that needs to be collected from the people's income. This increases the costs of the industrial manufacturing facilities. So see, well, once again, we are losing to importers. But we wanted to introduce registration fee for second-hand cars, because those cars were second-hand imported from Europe. We had introduced 500 cisterns, and Turks, when we were in Hanover, were laughing at us. We introduced 500 second-hand cisterns to Ukraine, and they were thinking, like, are you crazy? So before they began to increase this military fee, which is nowadays is a huge amount of money, which is a big financial burden to companies. Yes, I understand what you're talking about. Now, Volodymyr, you produce industrial products, and I know that right from the start you wanted to target not the national market, but you wanted to export. Just like Ruslan has said it. we may end up in a situation when, unfortunately, our trucks may get stuck on the border. Then we have to have meetings with the Polish counterparts in order to regulate these issues. I know that you have been in such conundrums. At the time you began to build your facility, why did you mean to export? Isn't it difficult for you to keep exporting, meaning that one of the export markets that you are working with is the United States, and logistics is too long? My name is Alexander Biletsky. Probably I am the only representative of the industry here, manufacturing industry. I'm also a vice president of the Ukrainian Entrepreneurs and Producers Association. Therefore, I very well know what's happening in our industry overall. So let me tell you very briefly about the enterprise in charge of which I am. I'm the CEO of SHERP, which is the global producer of the best amphibians vehicles world over, and our main market, sales market. Well, first of all, it was a matter of localization. We've just counted 92% is something that we do wholly in Ukraine. So our market is 92% localized. A lot of the attendees at this conference have visited our enterprise. Metro can confirm it, that this is an amphibious. It's a fully amphibious program. We buy the best products, metals in the world, like the best Swedish steels, unlike the governmental concept that we are supposed to be a raw material appendage to Europe. On the contrary, we buy raw materials from Europe, and we create added value products here in Ukraine. Our core market, as you have said, are the United States and Canada. Another large buyer of ours is the UN, which in Africa have replaced their helicopters with our amphibia. And this is the official information that you can read on their UN website. Nowadays, they can deliver their products, 1 ton of products per $200, whereas previously with the helicopters that would cost them 1,000, several thousands even sometimes. So we have a lot of communication with them. Our third market is India. We have a joint production facility in India with a large Indian corporation. In India, we manufacture SHERPs for multiple purposes. And this is my next question about the Indian market, because Ruslan, you have just brought me to this point. Let me just be very brief describing that. So basically, we are a company which is present basically and virtually in all of the continents, including the Arctic and the Antarctic, because we also participate in different expeditions to Asia, New Zealand, Australia, Africa. We're already in love with your enterprise. Honestly, I promise I will go to you. I will immediately cross the road, because our offices face each other, by the way. So when you were setting up your business, why did you immediately target exports? And question 2, in order to export, it requires a lot of documents, licenses to be able to prove that your product is high quality. Just because you are in contact, I am in contact with a lot of producers. I know exporting to other countries is really challenging, because when people hear Ukrainian, they don't know anything about Ukraine. For them, it's all about poor quality, and they may not know that this is a cool product. So my question is, you immediately began to target exports. How did you go about doing that? Why? Perhaps one day I would also like to go for that. So what do I need to care about right from the start for me to export safely? The first thing to mention, although there are several items to be mindful of that perhaps would deserve a whole discussion. In our case, it was easy and simple. We created a niche product, absolutely unique. We were trailblazers in this respect. An innovative product, you mean? Yes, it was a groundbreaking thing. Before us, there hadn't been anything in the market of the kind. Therefore, others are trying to catch up with us. We have some rivals nowadays, but still we are trying to move much faster, and we are introducing a lot of investments into R&D. And the situation has somewhat changed, and the war has demonstrated that our engineering school is really mighty. By the way, I'm in constant touch with some high-profile government officials, representatives of businesses, in the West. Nowadays, it's a very positive trend. Everyone is perceiving Ukraine positively. They understand that we have a cool engineering school. Ukrainian engineers are fantastic. So I think it's a very positive signal for the further development. The only thing is for us to understand how to monetize that, how to capitalize on that, especially from our R&D, because our R&D is mixed up with mass production. Not in favor of Ukraine. But in answer to your question, then probably the first point is, of course, your strategy. It has to be well thought through. You cannot move as a business or a country without a strategic plan. So a strategic plan, from my perspective, is something that needs to be based with perspective to 20 to 30 years from now. Something when we speak about strategies for a year, it's laughable. It's nothing to talk about. It's very short term. The second item is the level of your organization. You need to constantly upgrade that. This relates both to business and the country overall. And especially this refers to wartime, because I'm also a veteran. This is of utmost need for Ukraine, because we always need to compete at the level of organization. So that's another thing that you need to put very high stakes at. So this needs to be emphasized a lot on. Next thing is, of course, leadership. Don't be afraid to take on, to claim, to set up your bars high. Once I remember we were talking about your course that you organized for women. Of course, this does not relate to women. In the previous panel discussion, Mr. Tihipko had to say that people are fearful of dreaming big. And instead, they just want to take small steps. Perhaps this is something that also relates to these one-year strategies. Yeah, you're right. We do a lot of training sessions meant for people, like women in particular. We have selected women from Kharkiv region. Most of the time, people have micro goals. They don't dream big. Although we live in this big globalized world where with the help of your telephone, you can move everything around, where everything is already like a television set, like your computer, everything is contained in your telephone, and everything is easily accessible and available to you. Like in the previous panel, they mentioned Tsarichanka and some other small villages. You can be set in this tiny, small village of Tsarichanka and do your business with Tokyo, for example. This informational world does not put any restrictions on you in this regard. So this is probably another thing that I had to mention, expansion. You need to be expansive. You need to think expansively. You need to set up your bar very high. And lastly, cooperation. Very, very important from the perspective of business. One needs to learn how to pursue common interests. That's something that Ruslan was speaking about. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I keep observing this all the time. There are some things which, in fact, are so baseline, but they're so efficient. For example, over the last year, we lost 50 industrial facilities, machine building enterprises. People never put their heads around this idea, for instance, that these things are so easy to tackle. When a group of people get together and generate ideas, and generate resources, which is more important. 1,000 people, invest $1,000, and then you come up with $1 million. So cooperation is a global way and a fantastic tool to do your business and run it from anywhere. So this is based on trust. But our society somehow, we have learned to trust. Perhaps in the first year of invasion, there was a great deal of credibility that the whole society could lend. And that's something that could be invested in the economy. And if we had learned to do something as joint efforts, that would be a tremendous thing. By the way, if we want renaissance of our industrial capacity, we need to think along the lines of uniting our efforts, how to cooperate. Yes, I can see Ruslan wants to add something. Another very important thing concerning cooperation. We get to see that from different exhibitions. Today, this is the 15th national stand taking place, and we united 200 different national companies. So we can see how this cooperation is taking place, even from the standpoint of negotiations with suppliers. Like a German supplier would like to set up an operation here in Ukraine, producers of braking systems, brake systems. So all of these things have to demonstrate that this is already a trend shaping up, and this is contributing very beneficial results to us. Another thing, at one point we had to produce fire engines, and Isuzu company provided us with some pairs of chassis. In a couple of months, we managed to assemble 130 vehicles. Great. Alexander, you said that you have a manufacturing facility in India. You also said about opening that line, and you said that in India it was slightly easier than in Ukraine to launch your enterprise. So I am somehow grounded in this stereotype that India is difficult in its mentality, and you argued the opposite. And Ruslan has also mentioned that. So what do you think is it that we need to make things easier about rules, procedures, to make it easier to do business? We need to change the level of organization. What do you mean by that? What do you imply by that? The time that took us to go through the quantification at the Ministry of Defense alone, at the same time, in the meanwhile, we built plans in India. You see, their level of state organization during the war right now here in Ukraine, it's disastrously poor. It's just next to impossible. And it was yesterday, I was so embarrassed when a friend of mine called from the General Staff, General Yatsuk, and he said, I need this vehicle. Let's make a fundraiser. Because for me to buy this vehicle, and I need it tomorrow, we need to be redeployed to another bank of the Seversky Donets. All of the bridges have been destroyed, and we need to evacuate people. And he himself argues that for him to do it at the Ministry of Defense, it'll take him at least 1 month, but with us it'll be much swifter. So even if during the war we cannot handle these things at the level of organization, if we lack call to act, when you need to do things urgently, decisions need to be taken no matter what. So this is a disastrous situation, and it's so embarrassing to talk about these things. So I'm not just talking about business, not about acquisitions to be made, but about something that is lifesaver. Very proper, simplified, streamlined procedures and proper understanding concerning how things need to be done. And this is especially about the level of organization. Thank you very much indeed. I just must speak about Nova Poshta. This is my employer. And if we see what happened at the time of the full-scale invasion, we didn't put our operations on the stall. And I'm sure everyone had their own sustainability plans. It's a must-have for everyone. So probably that's something that needs to be done at the governmental level, so that in situations A, B, and C, you know how to act. So these manuals have to be there, and you need to act by those books. I know, Inga, that your company, MasterCard, also runs a great number of different training courses in order to raise competencies of entrepreneurs. And I know that MasterCard is keenly interested in making sure that all of the businesses make transactions via you. So can you tell us how you're going about that, and as well as about your vision? What can a businessman do if they lack experience, no hands-on experience or practice from first hands? How to approach policy writing, action plan writing, business plan, anti-crisis responses? From your perspective, how does that have to be done? How to teach people?
Our latest survey shows that 1 in every 6 entrepreneurs has started their business in the latest years of large-scale war. So that's part of the Ukrainian DNA. How many have closed their business? We didn't have that data, but it's okay, rating and anti-rating. So depending on the courage, but so 66% told us that they don't have any experience of entrepreneurial activity. When it's a small store, it's okay, but if you want to scale up, you only have to have knowledge. So as I said, payment technologies is one story, and here we fully facilitate that together with financial industry. But all the other programs, training, grants, it also helps. By the way, we talked about grants today. 27% of entrepreneurs use either state or international grants. It's another indicator. So people will use it. I agree that it doesn't resolve fully the question of funding. The loans should be there, but 27% using grants is a great indicator. As for the latest survey, I'll share some figures. 56% of entrepreneurs either already work with other markets or are planning to enter foreign markets. So that's what Alexandra said. So that means this big dream emerged, a strategy of expansion. People reach other markets. So they export their service or their goods to the other markets, and we see what the entrepreneurs show. It's Poland, Germany, Lithuania, and Italy. So that's what we saw in the response. So the efforts are clear. Mastercards cannot be the one who fully solves the problem of training, but together with the banking industry, Ministry of Economy, and Ministry of Digital Transformation, we launch different programs in order to support, train, financially train. And I think it works. Why? What do you train? Can be, and Mitro said that you can fill out the application. I think the state has done this. So after state number 3, you lose your temper and just leave it because bureaucracy. But we have DIA. It's a great tool. Yeah. So you're fantasizing because I don't know. So do you have any practical things that people can learn and just do it? Yeah. Everything about payment instruments, and over the last 2 years, 20% of users have started using cashless. So Mastercard, for sure, can train that together with the banking industry how to do it. Secondly, what also we train them is to how to use artificial intelligence. We didn't talk about it today, but I want to say that we see some results. 21% within our study said that they started using the AI tools. Of course, it's for marketing mostly and communication with customers. So does it simplify their process, or just don't want to draw the save on people? I think it's both, because you cannot even split between two. Because if you make it your process is better, then you drive the cost down. So AI is already there. Our entrepreneurs are using it. Everything regarding the standard tools like marketing and communication, with the AI or without AI, we also support. We have training programs, and please don't forget that we, with the Ministry of Digital Transformation, we open a advisory center where you can have turnkey solutions, how to register your business, how to pay taxes, how to use cashless, how to go online. And so there are online web portal and offline as advisory centers, because if you have questions, we have places in the bank where you can consult about everything, financial services, how they can be provided to you, how you can be assisted in loans. So, Dmitro, coming back to you. You said what was done, like overview, but that's not enough, of course, depending, considering the exhaustion, the difficulties, the challenges, because people are running out of optimism. People are running out of, the drive that they had in 22, 23. What are you planning as a state to do to simplify this process of production, localization, regulations? So what are the plans for the subsequent steps by the end of this year? Like, can we expect some other things that make our life easier? Well, first I would like to say, from forum to forum, we have different connotations. We no longer say what we need or we don't need, we say what's not enough. Well, it's a serious step forward, because that means we understand that we need to produce, we need production, because production is survival. Like last year we said that Ukraine is a commodity-based country. This year we have grown. We're exporting high value added. Yeah, it's about getting more mature, more adult. Both our friends and our enemies are blocking commodity export for us from different sides. And that leads us to grow up. Like a British Prime Minister said, we don't have eternal enemies or friends, we only have national interests. So in these discussions, we start to understand what's our national interest. We need to learn production. Yeah, short-term plans. By the end of the year, it's obvious that we need to retain the amount of state-owned support programs, industrial development that we have now. Why is it important? Because using the industrial park example, we see that trust is a very important thing. That it takes long to build, but you can lose it quickly. So people believe the state has done the steps, delivered on the promise. People invested money. So business people build factories, investing money. That's because there's trust between investors, the communities, and the state. Continuation of programs is an important element of this trust. So people have invested in production of components. They want to understand that next year the program will continue. So they built another factory in a different part of the country to diversify. They have to understand that it's not going to disappear. Will not go to Romania and Czech Republic. So short-term task to retain the amount of state-supported programs, industrial parks, agricultural equipment, compensation 50% for Ukrainian-produced machine building equipment, vehicles, energy equipment, supporting investments. Maybe something else, we'll see. There's not enough money, but it's very important that not all donor funds would be used for running costs, but so 20 years ago we worked on the communication market. We know each other for so many years. Why you're not communicating that proactively? Because you have to look specifically. There's no information. So optimism of society is shaped from the newsreel. Why there's no such thing in the news? It's a good question. It dates back to what I said before. In industrial parks, if I would be speaking only for 3 years, that would be nothing. But with the deputies, with Viktor Holosuk, who started industrial parks, we were talking to people who invest money in infrastructure or factories. We've traveled all over the country. We talked to the biggest city mayors, communities, investors. We talked to gas supply company, etc. We matchmaking them. We say, you do this, you do that. You get more tax, you get more operational costs. So we work with those who actually need to deliver that. Now that they've done it, there are factories, there are industrial parks with infrastructure, with buildings. Now I will be telling them for wider public, because we can show it. While we cannot show anything, nobody will believe us. So we work with people who do it professionally. They understood the concept. They started cooperating. Another important thing, in our work in industrial parks, we managed to explain to the mayors that a factory that they will have is their profits, their revenues. And so they started looking at investing in their own community as a way to increase revenues into their budget. And at that time, the mayor turns from hunter to invest nanny. I cannot explain this to the mayor from a TV screen. I can only explain it personally, and it worked. So all the programs that we do First, we communicate them to the target audience. If we have agricultural machine building program, so we have producers, vendors who have to believe that they have to increase capacity, and on the other hand, there are agricultural companies who should understand that Ukrainian sprinkler is maybe better than John Deere, so we work with them, so they're effective. As soon as we see the results that we can show for larger public, well, sprinkler is a sprinkler. Not many people need it. They need to use TikTok. Right. So as soon as it's mass results, we'll start. So how many industrial parks are now in Ukraine? Well, statistics are not much use, but it's just interesting. 10 years ago, there was 0. There are about 90. That's important. Through the vibe, we're using, each community understands that they have to urgently create industrial park, whereas the parks that would be working, that's the indicator. They built 25 of them, but how many are working? And the dynamic is important. Ruslan, you wanted to add something? Well, it's a great question, and I would. So Alexander said a nice thing about organizing, effective organization process. As to communication, simple example. Have you calculated how many forums dedicated to experts happen in over a year? Quite a lot. Some 2 per month. A small example. On average, the national stand that we're building costs 120,000 euro. There are bigger, 300,000. So I took a 1 million USAD, converted it into national stands. And now, after the successful national stands, CEOs in Agrotechnic in Hanover, Agromech in Denmark, personal So in the next years, the contracts, we have them, and even donors don't need to support me. But I know that the forums that happened in Ukraine took 5 times more money from donors. They're communicating why they're everywhere. I was the editor of business newspaper. I know what communication is. I've worked there for 8 years to popularize protecting Ukrainian businesses. Now, in terms of popularization, 16 stands, only 2 ambassadors visited. International ministers come to those stands, but Ukrainian ambassadors, no. The minister, we say to the minister, please invite your ambassadors. It's important. So it's time for solutions and actions. So effective solutions. If you can talk all you want, but if you have a Halhofer, the biggest trolling producer, and if they look at TransUpto, how can this be 40% difference in price, the same functions? So don't go into the market. I will. So it's victory, but then it turns out that our state, for some reason, for this type of product, introduced the same conditions as for commodity: 180 days, returning foreign currency. But a dealer in Hanover says, in a year, I need 100 units shipped all over Europe, and the government decides to increase by 270. 4 months, the solution is standing still between the National Bank and the ministers. And if you look at the number of exports that this goes, it's miserable. The state doesn't even risk the losses. So that's a small amount. 4 months or 5 months. So you come back to the low efficacy of organization in the government. Yeah, the same question. If you look at who's hanging in the Ministry of Economy on the number of letters, yeah, the foreign currency control. These are the biggest Ukrainian players. I've been dealing with this all the time. The cycle of processing documents is very long because they used to work with the grain traders, and everybody's hanging in the queue, in the backlog. We keep talking, and they just put fingers to each other, National Bank or Ministry of Economy, and it's not resolved. Although it's a problem that is not a problem at all. They get together, decide, and do it. because they work with grain traders with big cycle processing and documentation, like machine. We're talking about huge companies that create value added, but create for them the quick conditions, because fines are colossal. Krukovsky wagon building received a fine last year. So yeah, it's a big challenge where the bureaucracy stands in the way in elementary things, and everybody keeps asking them, and there's no explanation of why they don't do it. I mean, publicly, I want to ask the National Bank, who's present somewhere here, friends, you got to start working. 4 months now after the government voted to make 270 days for machine building. Just do it. There are no reasons not to do it. Everybody understands that machine building you can't sell in 20 days. You can't. It's against the logic of this business. So don't ignore it. Just there's nothing to discuss. There's nothing to analyze. It's been hanging in the air, and just do it. National Bank, I hope you hear us. Please, yeah, we'll go to their Facebook page and write comments, because they do respond to that. The best discussion starts when the moderator is not necessary anymore. Thank you for that, Sergey. When we met and talked about these topics, you touched upon an important thing, which is big things. As Metro said, it's important to stay on course, to have sustainable rules, longer period of time, and we hear it from the changes to understand the values. What's important for us? What are strategic priorities? You said that it's not the government has to do it; it's the businesses have to do it. So how should this process be organized? Who has to be in this process? So first of all, it's the right time to look at the strategic situation and analyze it, because the initiatives are good and everything, but we live in an economy. We have limited resources, and we need to choose where to invest. So when we talk about investing in the economy, it's a great thing, but how, where, what do you invest? Some people say processing should be increased, effective agro. Others say that's not effective because it's a very competitive market and too little value added, but we have a huge potential of agricultural sector. So you can simulate sprinkling, etc., irrigation. So we have 579 program, but who knows or who has seen an analysis of how effective this program? We have used some 15 billion hryvnias of budget, but what did it give? And there's no such analytics. And plus we have the clash of different positions when there's a competition of ideas. By the way, in the world there's this institution or rule that politicians put these ideas for discussion. There are think tanks, organizations who have to fund, and they are funded by governments, private investors. Why? To increase the level of trust, to have more understanding, choosing the strategy, the focus of investments, how effective these investments, how transparent are those things. And so in the US, 3,000 think tanks officially registered. In London, more than 200. In Ukraine, we also have about 100 or more think tanks, but there's still no experience to discuss these ideas. So national cashback, increasing taxes, it should go through this civilized cycle of analysis. How effective in public speaking? You don't pass the law without saying to anyone that you do it. So the state has to be ready for discussion, has to be open. And businesses, well, maybe we need to fund and support these institutions that will be professionally doing this analysis, these assessments, so that we have more awareness and perception. So now it's the time for that. And all those conversations will be much more useful if we understand what specifically we expect to get and what do we get in the end. And there are independent experts who evaluate that. Right? We took a lot of time. It was an interesting discussion. So we discussed that there's still no renaissance, but there's a powerful movement that creates great production and helps. Thanks to Dmitro, I've learned that it works already and how it works. Thank you for telling us about cooperation, and hopefully you learned some useful things for yourself. I see organizers are throwing a lot of shade at me. Just one question, okay? You say, and I will repeat. I'm Vladimir Bashlik, Union of Industry Entrepreneurs. You talked a lot about the signs of normalization. You know, the normalization in Ukraine is strange. The IMF predicts in 10 years 4% growth. So we catching up without catching up. Certificates 60% National Bank. That is a competitor of normal economy. So question to everyone, very short one. If instantly National Bank will decrease the interest rates for certificates to 8%, what's your attitude? I cannot give the floor to everyone, just Sergey, quickly, because you for sure know more than I. So short version, the interest rates corresponds to certain certain objective. 16% for certificates doesn't exist. 13%, and even the bonds have gone down. But if you take the system in general, it came to more or less equilibrium. 10% expected inflation, 13 interest rates, and there is devaluation, but it's on the same level, which is basically shows that the real interest rate becomes much low. And I think by now the situation is more or less stabilized and predictable. Thank you so much, dear friends. We can't take any more questions, but we stay here. You can approach to any speaker after we make a group photo and ask your question. Thank you so much, everyone.